A pilot vanishes over open water after describing something he insists is not an aircraft. Deep in a Swedish forest, 3 men encounter a dying figure that shouldn't exist. In California, 3 boys watch a craft land and something stepped out of it. And decades earlier, along the waters of Georgian Bay, small figures are seen working beside a silent sphere. Welcome to Strange Encounters. On an otherwise quiet evening in October of 1978, a young pilot lifted off from a small airfield near Melbourne, Australia, and vanished without a trace. No wreckage, no distress call, no confirmed explanation. Only a voice, calm, controlled, describing something that, by his own words, was not an aircraft. This is the story of Frederick Valentich and the final moments of a flight that may have encountered something far beyond explanation. Frederick Valentich was just 20 years old. He lived with his family in suburban Melbourne and had long dreamed of becoming a commercial airline pilot. Flying wasn't just an interest, it was his future, but that future had not come easily. Valentich had logged roughly 150 hours of flight time. He had failed multiple commercial pilot license exams. Instructors noted weaknesses in his performance, particularly under pressure. There had been incidents, minor but concerning, including entering restricted airspace and misjudging flight conditions. Still, he persisted. On October 21st, 1978, Valentich prepared for what should have been a routine flight. He filed a flight plan from Melbourne to King Island, a journey of roughly 235 kilometers across the waters of the Bass Strait. He told authorities he was traveling to pick up passengers, but there was a problem. No passengers were actually waiting for him on King Island. The true purpose of the flight remains unclear. At 6:19 p.m., Valentich took off in a Cessna 182 Skylane. The conditions were good. Visibility was clear. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the open water below. For nearly 40 minutes, everything appeared normal. Then, at 7:06 p.m., Valentich radioed Melbourne Air Traffic Control. What followed would become one of the most chilling aviation transmissions ever recorded. Melbourne, this is Delta Sierra Juliet. Is there any known traffic below 5,000 feet? The controller responded simply, no known traffic. There was a pause. Then Valentich spoke again. Seems to be a large aircraft below 5,000 feet. The controller asked him to clarify. Valentich hesitated. He wasn't sure what he was looking at. Moments later, his voice returned, steady, but now carrying a trace of confusion. It's approaching from due east. It seems to be playing some sort of game. It's flying over me 2, 3 times at speeds I could not identify. Air traffic control pressed him again. Delta Sierra Juliet. What type of aircraft is it? There was a longer pause this time. Then Valentich stated, it's not an aircraft. As the transmission continued, Valentich began describing the object in greater detail. It appeared long, metallic, reflective. There was a green light. He said it was orbiting above him. At one point, he reported that it had passed directly over the top of his aircraft, close enough to observe its shape, but not clearly enough to identify. It's hovering, and it's not an aircraft. Despite the strangeness of what he was describing, Valentich did not sound panicked. If anything, he sounded focused, alert, trying to understand what he was seeing. The controller asked if he could confirm the object's identity. Valentich responded carefully. Melbourne. It's a large aircraft, but it's not an aircraft. There was something final in the way he said it, as if he had reached a conclusion he could not explain. Then his tone shifted, subtly but unmistakably. It's hovering, and it's not an aircraft. A pause. My aircraft is orbiting, and the thing is just orbiting on top of me. What happened next is where the mystery deepens. Valentich reported a rough-running engine. Engine is rough, idling rough. The controller acknowledged attempting to guide him, but Valentich's attention was no longer on his instruments. It's not an aircraft. Those would be his final words. The transmission did not end immediately. For 17 seconds, the microphone remained open. No voice, only sound. Investigators later described it as metallic scraping, irregular noises, something mechanical but not consistent with a typical aircraft failure. Then, silence. Frederick Valentich never checked in again. A massive search operation was launched across the waters of the Bass Strait. Air and sea crews scoured the region. They found nothing. No wreckage, no oil slick, no life raft, no emergency beacon signal. It was as if the aircraft had simply disappeared. In the days that followed, reports began to surface. Witnesses along the southern coast of Australia described strange lights in the sky that same evening. Some spoke of fast-moving green lights. Others described objects hovering, then vanishing at high speed. None of the sightings could be definitively connected to Valentich's flight, but they added another layer to an already unsettling case. Years later, a piece of aircraft engine cowling washed ashore on King Island. It was believed to be consistent with a Cessna 182, possibly Valentich's, but the identification was never confirmed. Even in physical evidence, nothing was certain. Skeptics have offered explanations. Some point to spatial disorientation. Flying over open water at dusk can be dangerously deceptive. With no visible horizon, a pilot can lose all sense of orientation, mistaking sea for sky or lights for solid objects. Others suggest he may have been observing a bright planet like Venus, combined with reflections in his aircraft canopy. A misinterpretation, a tragic illusion. But those explanations leave questions behind. Why did he repeatedly describe structured movement? Why the consistent mention of a green light? Why the sensation of being followed, circled, observed? And perhaps the most unsettling of all, what produced the sounds in those final 17 seconds? There are more speculative theories that Valentich staged his disappearance, that he intended to vanish, but no evidence supports this. No financial motive, no confirmed sightings, no trace of him ever found. More than 4 decades later, the case remains unsolved. A routine flight, a clear night, a trained, if inexperienced pilot, and a final transmission that defies easy explanation. Somewhere over the dark waters of the Bass Strait, a young man looked up into the sky and saw something he could not identify, something he insisted was not an aircraft, and then he was gone. In the summer of 1955, deep in the forest of northern Sweden, 3 lumberjacks watched something impossible fall from the sky. There was no explosion, no wreckage, no smoke, only a flash of light, so intense it seemed to pass through the trees themselves. And when it was over, something was waiting for them in the clearing, something alive. It was early morning, around 6 o'clock. The men were working in a remote stretch of forest near the Gulf of Bothnia in Västernorrland. The air was still, quiet. Then suddenly, the sound of something crashing through the trees, branches snapping, leaves tearing. Whatever it was moving fast, and it wasn't under control. Moments later, they saw it. A cigar-shaped object tumbling through the forest canopy, not flying, falling. It disappeared ahead of them toward a clearing near a river. Expecting an explosion, the men ran, but when it hit, there was no crash, no fire, only a blinding flash like a giant camera bulb engulfing the forest. For a split second, the world turned white. The trees, the ground, even the air itself seemed transparent. Then came a force, like a vacuum, pulling everything inward. Branches, leaves, even the men themselves were thrown forward. And then, silence. When they reached the clearing, there was nothing. No wreckage, no crater, no sign of the object at all, just scattered timber and disturbed earth. Confused, they turned back toward the forest. That's when one of the brothers shouted, "There's someone here!" Lying on the ground was a small figure. At first glance, it looked like a man, but something was wrong. He was only about 4 feet tall, perfectly proportioned but small, compact, powerfully built, and around his body, a faint white glow pulsed like a halo. One of the brothers stepped forward and reached out to touch him. The moment his hand made contact, he screamed. He staggered backwards, saying it felt like a violent electric shock. At that exact moment, the figure opened his eyes and spoke in perfect Swedish. "Do not touch me. It will only bring you difficulties." The witness would later describe him in extraordinary detail. His skin was pale with a yellowish tone, his eyes completely black. No white at all, deep-set, almost hollow. His face was bruised, marked by wounds that didn't bleed, but instead seemed to weep. His hair was thin, almost white, his ears fused into the sides of his head, and when he smiled, his teeth were small, uniform, and strangely flat. His hand had 5 fingers, but no nails, and when he moved them, the last 2 fingers seemed to move as one. He wore a form-fitting suit, metallic, reddish in tone. It clung to his body like a second skin. At his waist, a wide belt with a glowing blue buckle. At his feet, strange enclosed footwear. The soles vibrated, not like fabric, not like rubber, more like machinery. The witness would later compare them to the tracks of a tank. The being seemed aware of their thoughts, responding before questions were spoken. At one point he said, "It is because of the clothing I can stay with you for a while. Internally, I am destroyed." From somewhere within his suit, he produced a small rectangular object no larger than a matchbox. He pressed into its surface with a small stylus, then attempted to throw it away. "Do not touch it," he warned. "It will tell my people what has happened, so they will not come looking for me." The other 2 men suddenly and silently walked back into the forest, as if dismissed, leaving one man alone with the being. For 2 hours they spoke. What was said was never fully revealed. Only fragments remained. The being claimed he came from a place near a constellation known as the Eagle, that multiple races had visited Earth, that some had watched humanity for thousands of years, and that others were preparing for future settlement. As time passed, the light around him began to fade. His breathing slowed. Then, just before the end, he gave the man a folded bag. "When I am dead, place me inside this and put me in the river." He warned them to wash afterward, or risk becoming ill. His final words were quiet, almost poetic. You come without wanting to and leave against your will. Our life is like vapor. And then he died. With the help of the others, the man placed the body into the bag. Even though the material, it burned their hands. They carried it to the river. When it touched the water, it began to react, bubbling, dissolving. Within minutes, there was nothing left. No body, no trace. Days later, the witness returned to the site. The rectangular device was gone, but the stylus remained, a small metallic object. He kept it, proof, he said, that it had really happened. It's a remarkable story, detailed, emotional, and deeply strange. But when we step back and begin to examine it more closely, a very different picture begins to emerge. Number one, the timeline problem. The event is said to have happened in 1955, but the story doesn't appear until decades later. There are no original reports, no police records, no newspaper coverage, nothing from the time it supposedly occurred. Number two, the witness. The account comes from a single man, telling his story 30 to 40 years after the fact. The other witnesses, the two brothers, were never identified, and by the time the story surfaced, they were already dead. Number three, no physical evidence. The body disappeared, the craft vanished, the only remaining object, the stylus, was never tested, never photographed, never verified. It exists only as a claim. Number four, the narrative itself. The story contains elements that are familiar. A dying visitor, advanced technology that leaves no trace, telepathic communication, philosophical final words. These themes appear again and again in UFO literature, especially in stories that emerged decades after the events they describe. Number five, the missing investigation. An event like this, a crashing object, a blinding flash, multiple witnesses, would almost certainly leave some kind of record, but none has ever been found. Not in Sweden, not anywhere. So what are we left with? A story told long after the fact, with no evidence, no documentation, and no way to verify what really happened, but also a story so vivid, so detailed, that it continues to be shared decades later. Was it a real encounter, a distorted memory, or something else entirely? Sometimes the most compelling mysteries are the ones we can't prove and can't quite dismiss. May 20th, 1977, late evening, just before 11 p.m., in a quiet stretch of land near Willow Pass Road and Mallard Slough in West Pittsburgh, California. The area sits along the edge of the Georgian Bay marshes, flat, open ground, broken by patches of grass, railroad tracks, and industrial structures in the distance. That night, 3 14-year-old boys, Lenny Young, George Ferreira, and Patrick Morrison, were out together passing time. They talked about hitchhiking somewhere, maybe heading toward an old pump house nearby. Nothing unusual, just a typical night. Then they noticed lights. At first, it was a formation. Several bright red lights fixed in position with a single blue light moving between them. The lights didn't behave like an aircraft. They held their shape, steady and controlled. Before the boys could fully process what they were seeing, the object suddenly shot away, covering what they estimated to be miles in just seconds. And then it came back. The lights returned, and began descending toward the field. This time it didn't stop in the sky, it landed. Roughly 150 feet away from where the boys stood, a craft settled into the field. In the dim light, they could make out its shape, round, flat, like a disc. Along its edge were square sections of light, almost like windows. The surrounding area remained dark, with only faint illumination from the object itself. And something else happened. A door, or opening, became visible on the craft, and from it, 3 figures emerged. All 3 boys would later describe them in similar terms. They were about 5 to 6 feet tall. Their bodies appeared dark, but not solid, more like smoke or shadow, something that didn't fully hold a defined shape. They had no visible faces, no features, no clear clothing. One of the boys would later struggle to describe what he saw, saying it was almost as if something like a skirt or covering hung over where a head should have been, obscuring any detail. The figures moved toward them. Their motion was unnatural, rigid, mechanical, almost robotic. At least one of the boys felt they weren't moving independently, as if their movement was somehow linked or synchronized. There was no sound, no voices, just the slow approach. At that point, the boys ran. All 3 turned and fled the field, convinced they were being followed. They didn't look back for long, but long enough to feel certain the figures were still coming after them. They ran until they reached safety at a nearby house. Shaken, out of breath, and visibly terrified, they told what they had seen. Authorities were contacted. Deputies from the Contra Costa County Sheriff's Office interviewed each of the boys separately. Their accounts remained consistent, both in what they saw in the sky and what they encountered on the ground. There were no signs of intoxication, no indication they had been under the influence of anything. The fear they displayed was described as genuine. Later, investigator Richard Haynes also spoke with them. He found no evidence of fabrication and noted that the boys appeared sincere in their account. One of them would reportedly experience recurring nightmares in the weeks and months that followed. Despite the intensity of the encounter, no physical evidence was ever recovered. No landing traces were documented, no additional witnesses came forward, no radar data confirmed the object, and no photographs were taken. The case would later be reported in the Oakland Tribune in April of 1978, bringing wider attention to what the 3 boys claimed to have seen. But even with multiple witnesses, consistent testimony, and official interviews, the encounter remains unexplained. 3 boys, 1 landing, and 3 figures that had no faces at all. Late one summer evening in 1914, along the rocky shoreline of Georgian Bay in Ontario, 8 people quietly watched something that should not have existed. Floating silently on the still surface of the water was a strange metallic sphere. Around its lower edge, several small figures, no taller than a child, were moving quickly, struggling with a long green hose that disappeared into the lake. For nearly 10 minutes, the witnesses watched these tiny beings working around the craft, completely unaware that anyone was observing them from the shoreline. Then the sphere lifted straight out of the water, tilted upward, and shot into the sky. But as it departed, one of the small figures was still clinging to the outside of the craft, and the man who witnessed it never stopped wondering what became of him. According to the account, the incident took place in August of 1914 along the shores of Georgian Bay the vast northeastern arm of Lake Huron in Ontario, Canada. The story was later reported by a man named William J. Keel, who said he had been 18 years old at the time. On that evening, Keel was with a small group along the shoreline. The group included a Canadian couple and their 3 young children, along with 3 young American men. They were gathered near the rocky shoreline, resting quietly among the brush and boulders that lined the water. At around 5 in the afternoon, one of the children noticed something unusual. A deer had stepped out to the edge of the water and was standing motionless, staring out across the lake. The girl looked in the same direction. What she saw immediately caught her attention. Floating on the calm water, about 450 feet from the shore, was a strange object. She called to her mother, who then alerted the others. Everyone in the group moved quietly closer to the rocks and brush along the shoreline and watched. The water was perfectly calm and the air was still. Out on the lake sat a globular craft, roughly 15 feet in diameter. It appeared mostly spherical, but slightly flattened at the top. Around the lower portion of the sphere was a square-shaped substructure at the waterline, almost like a narrow platform or deck encircling the base of the craft. Standing on this platform were 2 small humanoid figures. According to Keel, these beings were no more than 4 feet tall. Their bodies were thin and human-shaped, dressed in tight-fitting suits that seemed to shimmer in the sunlight. As they moved, the color of the suits appeared to shift between green and purple, giving them an iridescent appearance. On their heads were square-shaped yellow headpieces, almost like boxy helmets. The 2 small figures appeared to be working with a long green hose, roughly 2.5 inches in diameter. At the end of the hose was a round object. The hose extended down into the water, and the beings seemed to be struggling with it, manipulating the length of it vigorously as though they were trying to remove kinks or untangle it. The other end of the hose disappeared into the body of the craft above them. While the 2 figures worked on the platform below, something else began to happen above them. From the top of the craft, 3 straight pipe-like structures suddenly extended upward. Alongside these pipes, 3 more small figures appeared, merging so that their heads and shoulders were visible above the top of the sphere. These figures also wore square yellow headgear, but their clothing appeared khaki-colored rather than iridescent. Keel noticed that the heads of these beings seemed large in proportion to their thin bodies. The 3 figures began adjusting or manipulating the pipes on top of the craft, though from the distance Keel could not tell exactly what they were doing. For several minutes, the group on shore watched the strange scene unfold, and then something unexpected happened. The 3 figures on top of the craft suddenly stopped their work. They turned and appeared to look directly toward the shoreline. More specifically, they seemed to be staring intently at the deer that had originally noticed them. The animal immediately turned and bolted into the woods. Despite this, the beings showed no sign that they were aware of the humans watching from the rocks nearby. Moments later, the 3 figures on top of the craft disappeared back inside, and the pipes withdrew into the body of the sphere. Meanwhile, the 2 beings on the lower platform had finally managed to pull the green hose back toward the craft. They guided it through a square hatch located about halfway up the side of the sphere. As one of the small figures began climbing through the hatch, Keel briefly caught a glimpse of the interior. Inside, he said he could see what looked like bright green tiles set into the opposite wall. Just as the first figure disappeared into the opening, the craft began to move. Slowly, the spherical machine lifted straight up from the surface of the water. Water streamed down from its underside as it rose. The remaining small figure on the outside suddenly grabbed hold of a chrome-like ring that encircled the middle of the craft, clinging tightly as the object continued to rise. The sphere reached a height of about 15 feet above the lake. From that angle, Keel could see the underside of the craft clearly. It appeared to be made of a lattice work pattern of square metal sections, dull gray in color, with water still draining from it. Then, without warning, the craft tilted sharply backward. At an angle estimated between 30 and 45 degrees, the sphere suddenly shot away into the sky. It left behind only a very short trail of vapor or steam, no more than a few feet long. Within seconds, it was gone. Throughout the entire event, Keel said he heard no sound at all. The last thing he remembered was seeing the small figure still clinging to the outside ring of the craft as it accelerated away. It was a detail he later said he often thought about. He wondered what happened to that tiny being. The entire encounter had lasted roughly 10 minutes. The group discussed what they had seen briefly afterward, but conversation was limited. The Canadian family spoke only French, and the American students had difficulty communicating with them. One of the students attempted to translate, but his French was limited. Eventually, the group went their separate ways, and the incident was rarely spoken of again. More than 50 years later, after reading articles about UFO sightings in Fate magazine, William Keel finally decided to write about what he had witnessed. In 1966, he sent a detailed letter describing the event to the Aerial Phenomena Research Organization, commonly known as APRO. Investigators later interviewed him and said he remained firm in his belief that the small figures were living beings, not mechanical devices. He insisted that their movements appeared natural and purposeful. The Georgian Bay encounter is one of the more unusual early UFO reports, mainly because of how detailed the story is. The description includes multiple witnesses, a clearly visible craft, and several small humanoid figures engaged in what appears to be some kind of operation involving a hose placed into the lake. One particularly intriguing aspect is the apparent water collection activity, a detail that has appeared in several later UFO reports in which objects are seen hovering over lakes or oceans. However, the case also has several weaknesses that make it difficult for researchers to evaluate. The most significant issue is timing. Although the event supposedly occurred in 1914, it was not reported until 1966, more than 50 years later. By that time, public interest in UFOs was already widespread, making it impossible to know how much the memory may have been influenced by later stories. Another complication is that while 8 people were said to have witnessed the event, only William Keel ever came forward with a detailed account. None of the other witnesses were independently identified or interviewed. Still, the imagery described in the report is striking. A silent metallic sphere resting on the water, small figures working with hoses and strange equipment, and a sudden vertical departure into the sky. Whether the story represents an accurate memory, a misunderstanding, or something else entirely remains uncertain. But if the events described that evening on Georgian Bay truly occurred, then for 10 quiet minutes in the summer of 1914, a group of people on the lonely Canadian shoreline may have witnessed something extraordinary. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to like, subscribe, and leave a comment with your thoughts. It really helps the channel grow. Thanks for listening. I'll see you in the next episode of Strange Encounters.